Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch?
I'd like that.
Okay, and here we are today. We're with Dwier Brown. Dwier is a film and television actor, of course. He has been in many things: The Thornbirds, Quantum Leap, Criminal Minds, The Guardian, Ghost Whisperer, and the one that probably everybody knows him from is Field of Dreams. Probably one of my favorite movies of all time, if not my most favorite scene of all time. You played John Kinsella, the father of Kevin Costner's character in the movie. He wrote in 2014 a memoir entitled If You Build It, and you described it as Father's Fate in Field of Dreams. The book is awesome. I read the book last week or the week before, and I want to talk about that a little bit. So welcome. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, and thanks for your kind words about the book.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Could you tell me a little bit about your life when you were growing up, and how did acting start to play a role in your life, or when did acting start to play a role in your life?
Well, gosh, I have an older sister and an older brother, and they sort of started into acting. When I was 8 years old, my dad moved us from suburbia to this farm in the middle of nowhere in this house that was, I mean, it was in such bad condition. The farmer who sold us the 52 acres on which it sat was throwing the house for free. So that tells you what kind of shape it in. Everybody figured they'd just tear it down, but my dad wanted to fix it up. Anyway, I guess I started doing, theater and puppet shows and, shows at the town hall or in school or at the church, because it got me out of work around the farm, to be honest. And it was just, it was a respite from the kind of, we were way out in the middle of nowhere, just 3 or 4 houses within walking distance. And, so it was, it was probably out of self-preservation.
And you talked about in your book about your father. I'm sure a lot of people can relate. He would just take on projects within the house all the time. So they were something was always going on.
Yeah, he had a full-time job with Firestone Rubber Company as an architect, but I don't know how he did it. All of his spare time, on weekends was digging in the basement or tearing down a wall or putting up drywall or fixing the plumbing. I mean, I really, now that I'm grown up and I have my own houses that I fix up, I just don't know how he did it with a full-time job, but there was always some usually tedious job to be done.
Through his whole life?
Yeah, actually, gosh. To be honest, the house never even got finished in his lifetime. When he passed and my mom ended up selling the farm because it was just too much for her, there was still work to be done. And in fact, the man who bought it sort of undid everything my dad had spent 25 or 30 years doing, and, made it his own home, which I can't fault him for. But, it was hard to see, like, that was my childhood, plastered onto the walls and cemented into the basement. So it was, it's just one of those things that you learn as you get older in life, that, nothing is permanent.
Yeah, absolutely. So you went into to escape into acting when you were younger. When did you realize that you had a skill for it or a knack for it?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I don't know if I've realized that yet. But, the other thing I did was sports. That was another thing that was a legitimate thing that my parents would let us do. So my brothers and I were in sports year round and did plays whenever we could. So I knew I really liked it. And I went to college. Of course, I went to a different level of training in it. And then really started to get fit. But even at that, I was going to go work in advertising, because that was something I thought I could write, and maybe get in advertising and get to New York, and then I'd start auditioning. It's kind of that's how naive I was as a little farm boy. But I think instead I couldn't get a job in advertising, so I went to Chicago and tried to get into Second City and improv and all that stuff, which just really excited me. And it was there, I think, that I learned that, wow, there is a lot to this. This is a much deeper well of an art form than I had even imagined. But it spurred me on rather than frustrated me. And I knew that what I liked about it was that I knew that no matter how good I got, I could always get better. And I liked that aspect. In school had come fairly easy to me. So, I liked the idea that the challenge was never over, and it was sort of subjective rather than objective.
Do you remember your first paid, like officially you got a check or cash for a job?
Well, I managed to get in a summer theater company, the Organic Theater in Chicago. And I don't know if I think that was paid. It was almost nothing. But the other job I got was it was a McDonald's film they were making called Trials of a Linebacker, where I sort of played a high school linebacker who was an alcoholic. And I was in it with Aidan Quinn, who's kind of still has a TV show on now. And but that movie never came out. But it was probably my first paycheck of substance.
Mm-hmm. I'm not an actor, so I don't understand, but I do understand rejection. Is it tough for you? So you're going to, a lot of auditions, and I'd assume that just like a baseball player, you're getting, struck out or struck down, or is it tough?
I can tell you I have a terrible batting average. Even amongst actors, I think I would get, I was probably batting under 100 as far as many auditions as I went to ones I got. For some reason, that rejection didn't bother me. I mean, it hurts your feelings in the moment, but if I had, only now in my, in looking back at my career, I can't believe that I even did that. For someone who had sort of low self-esteem and not a lot of confidence, I don't know how I kept throwing myself into the fray, day after day, week after week. I really, but to me, that says that somehow I had reconciled that in my brain as not failure, or not ultimate failure, at least. That's the other good, the good thing, at least about television in that era, was there was always another job, hopefully coming down the pike. I had some very lean times, but I made up for a low batting average by getting to the plate a lot of times.
Did you ever think of quitting during those lean times?
A few times. And I write about that a little in the book, that I realize you realize so much the older you get, because you watch your own patterns and you can see them in their entirety. So you have a better vantage point. But I think quitting was the one thing that I felt that I could do. I have control over that, So the times I quit, damn it, I give up, and then unfortunately the one time, or one of the times that I did that, I became a carpenter, because I had all these skills from helping my dad build this 150-year-old house. But I decided I ended up with getting a job as a set carpenter. So I'm working on sets where I'm, working my butt off and dragging these huge pieces of scenery around and wrestling around with all this stuff. And then after we'd work for a week or 10 days, then they'd call the actors in, and these guys would come in their bathrobes and sit there with their script and read. And, I can't do anymore. I have to go back to my, and I just it made me so frustrated. I thought, that's what I want to be doing. And to spend 10 days making it all nice for them so they can go in the, in their air conditioned dressing room and then come back for the show. I thought, okay, that's what I want to be doing. But if I can't get enough work, I just have to be a better actor. So I would just go back into training, the way you probably would as an athlete who's not quite getting out of AAA or whatever. You've got to double down, if you want to do it.
And did seeing those people who maybe didn't appreciate what they had, actors at the time or actresses, did that help you as your success came in to appreciate the moments that you were in? Because
Yeah.
you've been on some pretty decent shows that I'm sure everybody loves. If I just run down the list, could you appreciate the moment?
Yeah, I think that's the effect it had on me was, okay, I had already worked on some shows, but then I quit. So I could remember like, oh God, that was nice to kind of be in the Thornbirds. Everybody's treating you like you're special. You're getting all this, treatment. But, that's a double-edged sword, as I'm sure it is for guys who are in AAA. There's people who are making it who you think, man, I am better than them. How are they in there? And there's a million reasons for that. The team has committed to them. They've got so much tied up in their contract. They can't bump them down to AAA. You've got to be so much better than them to keep them from looking like idiots for bringing this guy in or whatever it is. Or imagine the guy who's playing behind Derek Jeter at shortstop in the Yankees organization, or Cal Ripken. That they're screwed. They're behind a guy who's going to play every game for 20 years or something. And I think sometimes that frustration is overwhelming. But at the same time, you can also go, that guy is not as good as I am. I can make it in this. Or, you have those little encounters where some actor or some player says, dude, you're good, man. You just got to get a chance. If you straighten out this thing in your swing, you can, so I was, I guess, in that boat. Almost everything about an acting career, or, maybe any career, is that anything can be a positive or a negative. It just depends on how you take it. And sometimes both, you get down and then you get, then you get tough, So all those things, there were many actors who just were so frustrating because they weren't doing any of the right things and they're succeeding. And here I'm trying to be perfect and do this and failing. It was, it's mind boggling because you can't figure out what it is that you're doing wrong, or it's just not your time,
And sometimes it's not you. It's not your fault. You just said that. So,
totally. Or it's completely arbitrary that you could do nothing about. But it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt your feelings and doesn't frustrate you and all that stuff too.
Yeah. You talked in the book, it's a good story. Maybe you could tell it about being cut from the baseball team. I loved the story. Could you tell everybody about that?
Yeah, it's unfortunately not much to it, but I played Little League and I had my ups and downs in Little League, but as a freshman, in order to play sports year round, I tried out for the baseball team as a freshman in high school and I got cut, looking at the list, you running into the locker room and looking down, okay, not there, but the only thing I can say about that now is that it's my picture that's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I didn't really do it through baseball. I sort of snuck in the back door, but I'm there, and I think it counts nonetheless,
Absolutely. That's awesome. So how did you come about? Did you audition for Field of Dreams?
It was just an audition that came down like any other. There was sort of nothing spectacular about it other than I had read the book Shoeless Joe, on which it's based, and what the film was called, in fact, when we shot it, and loved it. This was like in college. A friend of mine gave it to me, and I just thought it was a great story. So anytime you audition for something that you love, it makes it that much more difficult and more rewarding if you get it. And it was kind of a long wait to find out, and I just had, as I recall, I just had that one audition with Phil Robinson in the room, and you second guess everything, just it was very much like baseball, you kind of, oh gosh, did I swing too early on that? I didn't see, whatever it is. And unfortunately, you don't get a second chance at that role, sometimes. I mean, frequently you'll get, callbacks and all that stuff, but yeah, so it was just an audition like any other, but all the more exciting because I'd read the book.
And so you played sports in high school when you were growing up, being in a baseball movie. So baseball is very emotional. It's people can be happy, they can be angry, they can be screaming at the players on the field. I guess it's the same as a movie. You're trying to get those emotions out of people. And the scene that you're in is a very emotional scene for me, and probably the thousands of people you've ran into who tell you how important that scene is to people. Did you know it at the time? I mean, in your book, you talked about your relationship with your father. Did you ever put two and two together that, wow, I'm in this movie and this scene is all about a father and a son? And
Yeah, I think I partially because the way the book is set up for your listeners out there who've read the book, the father does not play the big key part in that story the way Phil Robinson adapted the movie to go. The father is introduced very early in the show, and they sort of have little conversations, Ray and John, but there isn't this climactic moment there. He appears, surprisingly, it's everything. So I guess I was basing a lot of my performance on what I'd read in the book. And so it was the idea that it became such an iconic part of the movie was a surprise to me. I didn't know that until we saw the screening of the movie. For some reason, I just thought my little character was just tying up the last loose ends of the movie. And in fact, when I did audition, I sort of wanted to try out for a bigger part. I would rather be, one of the other 8 band ball players or all those guys. But, I'm certainly grateful that that didn't happen, because it was only when I saw the movie that I thought, oh my gosh, the whole movie has been moving towards my character's appearance. And certainly the beautiful score that James Horner put under made the whole movie feel like a storm coming out of the prairie that's moving towards this final, confrontation with father and son. So those were things I couldn't have, I didn't imagine. And I don't think I was alone. I remember all of us watching that. We're the ones who made the movie. The gaffer and the electricians and the set builders are all sitting in this, room and watching the screening a couple of days before it comes out. And we were all like mouths gaping, tears pouring down our face. And we were the ones who were in it. It was my face up there and I'm still crying. So I knew then that something was much bigger than our, individual participation in it.
how soon after did people start to realize when they saw you somewhere that, hey, you're that guy?
Well, it was pretty quickly. It didn't happen like in big crowds or anything like that, but it would usually be guys, first of all, and it would be guys who probably were athletes and probably baseball players. And, it would just be, happened in grocery stores and in in airports. People would be like, you look so familiar. Did I go to high school with you? And I'd be like, no, I'm from Ohio. So, and then oh my God, you look like that guy who was in Field of Dreams. And I was like, well, I actually am that guy in Field of Dreams. And, 8 times out of 10, they would just start almost immediately crying or telling me about their dad and how much that movie meant to them. And so I would end up, hugging these strangers and telling them about my dad who died a month before I went to go shoot that movie. And we would end up hugging, and, people are looking at us strangely. I'm in an airport hugging this guy. And, like it was moving for me because I lost my dad and I never got to watch the movie with my dad. So I would live vicariously through them. And I think they would live vicariously through their father, through me, getting one more hug from their dad, and that was kind of a strange but beautiful thing. And really, when I got a chance to think about it, it was really what I got into acting for, because I had grown up in a household where emotions were, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about, and, all those kind of things. And it's why I pursued acting, I think, was because my dad and my mom, in general, farm country, nobody was being emotional. That's just not something that happens there. So I was looking for that, and I found it through acting. I learned how to express those emotions, how to use my feelings to make other people access their feelings. And so here I was in this movie, and it's, it still happens 31 years after I made this movie. People still get emotional when they see me, and I try to honor that and, be as present with them and, talk to them about whatever they want to talk about. Usually it's, just that, gosh, I miss my dad, or it's my dad never played catch with me. And, I've been traveling around to minor league stadiums. I did 40 last year, and I play catch with fans. I get to be that, and it sounds kind of corny and weird, but I try to take it as seriously as someone will let me. People get awkward too, but if somebody wants to go deep with me about their dad or something, I try to, I try to go there with them, because to me, that's what life is about, is understanding ourselves, and most of that we pack into our emotions.
Do you remember like maybe the most amazing story somebody's told you that just you can't get out of your head?
Wow.
That you could tell?
Gosh. I mean, I put many of them in the book, but I mean, overwhelmingly, it's people missing their dads, or not speaking to their dads for 10 years, having had some fight, and they watch that movie and it totally tears them up, because, it cuts through the anger to the soft feelings underneath. And then they would go take their dad, say, "Dad, I know we're not talking, but come with me to this movie." And they'd sit and watch the movie. And then the movie itself would untangle all that mess and let them have a relationship again. Now, that was common, but to me, almost the most profound, that a movie could have that effect, that you could change somebody's relationship just by having a story that's also fun to watch and funny and entertaining and all that stuff. I mean, there are people who told me they changed careers. There's a guy whose dad was missing in action during the Korean War, and the movie indirectly helped him create an organization that found these fathers. And it turned out there were dozens of others who the government had been told were missing, when in fact they had real information that their planes had been shot down, but they, for public relation reasons, didn't want to, and I mean, that's sad. The father's still gone, but for this guy, this made me amazed. This guy who talked to me, he got to get his dad's remains, or not even his remains, but he got to have his dad buried in Arlington Cemetery.
Wow.
That meant the world to him. The guy's been gone for, 40 years, or I think it was closer to 50 years when the whole thing went down. But he and, a couple dozen other people finally got their dads buried in Arlington Cemetery. I mean, it's just, obviously it's a grave without remains, but it's so meaningful to them to take that chapter and say, yes, my dad was a hero. He didn't desert me. He's not missing. He's not being, tortured somewhere. This is what happened. And we got the government to finally give us the truth. And, that's powerful, from a movie. I mean, that to me is why I got into movies. I think I wish more movies and television had such high aspirations, or had such success in changing people's lives.
That has to be an amazing feeling to be able to bring those emotions out from people who normally probably wouldn't let those emotions out.
Yeah, I swear people sometimes tell me things, quietly, whispering to me things that they maybe never told anybody. And I'm just this stranger. I'm this actor. It's mind-boggling to me. That's why I take it seriously, even though it's kind of just weird. I'm a stranger, but I think when your dad isn't there anymore, or was never there for you, seeing someone who is, the dad, they allow themselves, their heart has already been opened by the movie to allow me to come in and, give them that hug, or tell them, what, I think your dad would be proud of you. If he left for some reason, I'll bet somewhere he wishes he hadn't done that, or did it for reasons we'll never understand, or, just help them just heal that stuff. Cause you carry it around, dad could be gone for years, but you're still acting like your dad's yelling at you and that you're never going to make anything of yourself, or, it's, yeah. I hate to say it's therapy, but it's to me, it's a pretty fun way to do therapy.
You talked in your book about your strained relationship with your dad. It kind of hits home for me, and probably for a lot of other people. How were you guys able to make everything better before he passed away?
Well, I wrote several chapters in the book about it. It was kind of a weird thing. I try to make it as brief as I can, but my dad was going to close up the summer cottage that we went to as a kid, and my mom couldn't go with him, and he's like 65 at the time, and I happened to be home, which was unusual. And I said, oh, gee, I'll go with you, Dad. Let's take a road trip. So we drove 2 hours. And during that, because I'd already become an actor and you do research about a character, you ask all these questions. And I thought, wow, I'm doing all this stuff about, fictitious characters. I don't even know that much about my dad. When you grow up with your dad, he's just your dad. You don't think he was a young man. He was a boy. He was a young adult. He dated other people. I mean, that's kind of mind blowing because, your parents are always, if they're together like mine were, they're a unit, and you just don't imagine that they ever had a life, So I ended up asking my dad a lot of questions and things and my dad he had a lot of secrets because he had such a difficult childhood. In the course of questioning him, driving down these country roads to this place, my dad starts crying. My dad cried my life. And he was telling me about how his dad essentially had abandoned them. Now, why I would be a 25-year-old guy and not know that about my dad is sad that he didn't feel safe enough or didn't want to open that can of worms. But, I think that era of men were like, don't tell anybody the bad stuff. It'll just make them feel bad. And, it was all about, I didn't even know my dad was sick when I went home and he died that night because nobody wanted to say, gosh, Dad doesn't look that good. Everything was trying to, make things better than they were. And, and of course you can understand that. These are Depression era people. This is World War II, kids who grew up with lots of kind of stuff. Bad news was everywhere. You didn't create more bad news by talking about feelings and all that stuff. So I understood it, but it was just amazing to me. And then, then that opened it. My dad's crying. I feel terrible now. I didn't want my dad to be crying, but as a result, it ended up breaking through the barrier that had kept us separate. He couldn't tell me things because he thought they would make me feel bad. So I didn't know anything. And it felt to me like he was just being strict and unemotional for no reason. And so suddenly, this made it all make sense to me. And what's really weird is I talk about in the book, we got down to the summer cottage where we had a creek that we used to play in. And before we left, I said, Dad, will you come down to the creek with me? And I was just wanted to look at it really, but I got down there and I said, hey, Dad, let's, I'd use the words that he always used. Let's take a dip. And he said, well, I don't have a bathing suit. And I said, neither do I, Dad. Let's go skinny dip. We're out in the middle of nowhere in, East Central Ohio. And, there's not a soul for, half a mile, So anyway, I can't believe I'm even saying this now. I went skinny dipping with my dad. And after the figurative unveiling and stripping down of our problems of our relationship, to then physically be stripped down and swimming in the swimming hole that we had grown up swimming in when I was a kid and he was a young man, was just kind of beautiful beyond, and at the time I didn't even think about it. It was only when I was writing the book I thought, oh my God, that's like, you couldn't write a better story than that almost, that, and it was, what it did was open my heart. I thought, oh my God, my dad didn't do this to be mean to me or strict with me. He was hurt. He was an 8-year-old boy. He's been carrying that around with him for the rest of his, for the rest of our lives together. And it just gave me so much more compassion and sympathy for him that it was, almost instant. My dad didn't change. He was still, who he was, but I changed. And that's what's important. As Mark Twain says, when I was 20, my dad was an idiot. By the time I was 40, I just, where did all this knowledge come from? Because, you're the one that you can't see the wisdom until you're of a certain age and you're like, so anyway, that was.
And then they were right. So
yeah. Most of the time you were right. My dad was, you get, if you're an aware person, you get smarter just by living, and of course you can't see that as a 20-year-old. You think all the answers, and that was the old days, Dad. It doesn't work that way anymore.
In the book, you tell a lot of great stories, but one I know very well. So people will, you're walking around, you smell a perfume, it makes you think about an old girlfriend, or you smell a dinner, you're out at a dinner, you smell a food, it makes you think about somebody that you love, their love. You talk about smelling your baseball glove, and it's something that I was like, wow, I do the same thing. It brings back so many memories. For me, it's the the oil that I rubbed, the Rawlings oil that I rubbed the glove with. Could you tell the story about your glove?
Well, I just happened to bring it here.
Oh, awesome.
This is my dad's baseball glove that I'm guessing his dad gave him when he was young. This is from the 30s. Johnny Moore's name on there. You can look him up. I did. And, you know, because of my relationship with my dad, because the movie is so much about fathers and sons, and because my father died before I could watch it with him, on all my events that I go around to fields and play catch with people, I bring this, and this is the mitt he taught me to play catch with, you know, and I have a great time showing young kids, you know, the kids who were started in Little League with those big webs, and I say, hey man, try this on, and they're like, oh my gosh, how did they catch with these things, you know, and all that stuff. It's very rewarding to side, and I sort of feel like, because this is my dad's mitt, anybody who puts their hand in it is shaking hands with my dad, and this is 31 years after he died. So I don't know, it warms my heart, and even though I should probably be taking better care of this mitt, my dad would be mad at me. But we used to saddle soap ours, and I try to take care of it in my way, is kind of an homage. But you know, smelling the mitt is just one of those things that, you know, there's this leather is not like even like new leather. This thing, you know, it has a certain sense of, you know, there's a deadness to it, but because it's so old. But to me, that smell is the smell I recognize from having had that mitt when I was a kid until my brother and I could afford to buy our own. And it, you know, it's just a touchstone, I think, really, you know, that's what, you know, even the smell, you know, I can smell saddle soap anywhere. There's not a mitt around, but if you're, you know, someone in a tack shop and you're kind of like, where's the baseball game or something, you know, those things, and freshly cut grass, all those things that very easily associate with baseball and you know, even the movie in Iowa and my dad, I guess.
So now baseball, there's a lot of pressure. You're up at the plate. People are watching if you're professional. You only have 3 strikes. On the set, you had to catch that baseball from Kevin Costner. You can't see it, but there's a film crew around you. I think there was a helicopter in the air. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on. There's a lot of money probably being wasted if you don't catch that ball. Could you talk about that pressure at that time?
Yeah, you know what? I didn't think about it ahead of time, because all I'm doing is playing catch. When I auditioned for the movie, I didn't even have to do a baseball audition like some of the other players who you know. So I thought, well, I guess they expect that I can throw and catch, you know, which was fine, because you know, I'd done it a million times with my brother. And the final scene there, where the helicopter pans up and you see the car's headlights going off in the distance. As much as today you do that on CGI, it would take somebody, you know, 20 minutes to create that. Back then, they didn't have that. That was 3,000 local Iowa farmers sitting in 1,500 cars on the 3 miles between where the field is and the town of Dyersville. They blacked out 5 other baseball games that are going on, because Dyersville's big in baseball. They made the trains stop so that there wouldn't be, you know, they're trying to make it look dark and this field have the focus. So they had to black out the city itself. And the director, Phil Robinson, is talking on AM radio into the car radios. That's how he was directing people, which I think was just brilliant. He's out there saying, okay, this time, okay, start over again. We're rolling and action. Okay. And anyway, in the last take, he had people flash their lights because you couldn't get the sense that the cars were moving. So anyway, all those things that, you know, and there's a guy in a helicopter. There's a guy named Davy Jones, who was a famous helicopter cameraman. He's hanging out of the thing, holding this $1 million camera. There's another guy adjusting the focus, and they start revving up the rotors. It's sitting in left field, getting ready to take off. And, you know, they tell us to play catch. The roto wash is like blowing us all over the place. We thought we had one shot at this. So we had to wait for the light to be just right, because it had to match the scene Kevin and I had already shot in the previous days. But it had to also be dark enough that you could see the headlights. So it was one of those, you know, the timing was of the essence, and we thought we had one take at it. We ended up getting 3, but we thought we had one. So suddenly, just when the thing's ready to take off, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, what if I drop the ball? Here's this whole movie that's working up to the father. And then, you know, Kevin looks at the ball and throws it. We're both in tears, and it drops out. I'd be like, oh, what an idiot I would look like, you know, because I'm thinking, this is the shot, you know, they can't fix something like that, you know, but I hadn't thought of it ahead of time, or I would have prepared. But people I think some people who've seen the movie say, "Gosh, you had a funny catching style." Well, they gave me this 1950s catcher's mitt that was, just as solid as a rock, and you couldn't even tell when the ball hit it. So, I mean, I was not going to drop that ball. So I would just be, on top of that thing and get it back to Kevin, let him drop it, not me. Like it was just such a funny thing when they were spending, $10,000 a minute shooting this thing, and I'm worried that I'm going to drop the ball, because I played catch with my brother a billion times growing up, and many other friends. You never think, who cares if you drop the ball? I mean, you're trying to make a good catch, but if you don't. But here I thought, oh my gosh, I do not want to be the object of humiliation for the rest of my life. So I put extra pressure on me. And then when I got the first take, it was like, oh yes, I did it. And then they're saying, we're going to get another take. And I'm like, oh. Anyway, I didn't drop it. It all went well, but it was just a funny thing to think about when I never even anticipated being worried about such a thing.
Do you keep any souvenirs from the movies that you're in? Is that something actors would do?
Oh, actors definitely like to steal whatever they can. But in Field of Dreams, like I obviously would love to have kept the uniforms, but the uniforms were from a rental house. I believe it was Western Costume, so they took them back. And just another anecdotal thing: the White Sox uniforms that the other guys wore were the same ones they'd worn the year before for 8 Men Out. So if somebody has those, probably John Cusack or D.B. Sweeney or, have worn the same uniforms that we wore. And that's kind of cool. But they didn't let us keep them. I have my hat, my little Yankees cap, but nothing else that was even the mitt that I have. This is my dad's mitt. They gave me a catcher's mitt. I at the time, nobody thought that they were going to leave the field there. Nobody thought that movie was going to, I mean, I thought, and I think many people thought, this is such a sweet little movie. Nobody's going to go see it. There's no sex in it. There's no violence. There's no, it doesn't have any of the things that would be, make it feel like it's going to be a lasting movie. Even once it was out, Rolling Stone said it was the worst movie of 1989. I mean, it's hard to imagine that now because it's sort of kind of, made its way into the classic, as a classic movie. It's in the, Library of Congress as a, cinematic gem. But at the time, who knew that the farmer was going to say, you know what, I'm not going to plow that under and put corn back in this year. I'm going to see if anybody comes out. And sure enough, they did. And then suddenly it became this symbol and this mecca for baseball players, for people with parents that were lost. People would come and spread ashes. And I mean, I think that place has a very hallowed feel to it, even though it's just a baseball field in the middle of a cornfield. There is nothing else to do there. It looks very much like it did when we shot the movie there. It doesn't cost anything to go, but there's a feeling of just, I don't know what it's hallowed, I was also in the movie Gettysburg, and obviously we shot that on the battlefields in Gettysburg, and they naturally have that feeling. If any of you have ever, well, you're close, they're in Easton.
Yeah.
If you've been there, you can feel that, Pickett's charge. You're just like, wow. I mean, something happened here. You can almost feel it. And I think in an entirely different way, Field of Dreams is also kind of getting that kind of, I don't know, deep sense of deep emotional connection in the middle of a field that's, I mean, it's been there for 31 years now, but I think so many more people have brought memories and done wonderful things there that it's taken on some of their emotional life. And
you go back, you just told me you were there last week.
Yeah. So. I was there last week. I was there in November. I mean, I'm going there a lot more in the run up to this game in August, but I've probably been there 15 or 20 times over the last 30 years, but it's always magical. Even in the snow, I was, as I was telling you, it was snow and ice and freezing cold. We had a catch, we took batting practice, and then our hands were like frozen. We had to go inside, but it's still just cool. It's just a neat place.
Whose idea was it? It's a great idea to have you go to minor league stadiums and get to meet everybody.
Well, that was also just a fluke. I wrote the book and expected to be doing, book signings in bookstores. And then somebody said, well, hey, would you come to our baseball party? I think it was at Kenosha, maybe the Kenosha Kingfish in Wisconsin, just north of Chicago. one of the first people in the Washington Wild things that are kind of in Western PA. And they were like, would you come and, and I was like, okay. And then I found, it suddenly became obvious. Like, of course, here's baseball fans. Most baseball fans have seen Field of Dreams and love it. So I just come there and I sit with my books. I sign anything anybody wants for free, but if they want to buy a book, I sell it to them for as cheap as they can get it online, and I get to sign it for them. So I don't know. It just ended up being this thing. So I went to 40 different stadiums from Connecticut to North Dakota to Florida to, I've been all over the place, and it's just fun everywhere I go. The feeling is the same. The people are just so happy to see somebody from the movie. I find in my years that people want a piece of that movie somehow. It might be true of every movie, but I think in particular that one, they want to touch it somehow. Even when the farmer didn't plow his corn under, people would leave stuff. People leave this is my dad's Giants hat, and I just want to leave it here. I'm leaving this relic of my life with you. People would put $20 bills, $100 bills under rocks in the driveway. There wasn't even a place to take money. And they're like, they want to feel like they have a piece of that experience, that movie, that whatever. So, it was just one of those things that I think my traveling around, and people are like, what are the odds I'm going to see an actor from that movie here in, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or the Iron Pigs. We were Lehigh Valley last year. Going again this year. Yeah.
That's what I just wanted to confirm. So you are coming here this year. When do you know that date yet?
What is that? I just brought out here. Is it the August 28th? I think. My tiny little calendar here. Look at this stupid thing. I just don't want to give somebody the wrong date, but yeah, Iron Pigs on the 28th of August.
Awesome.
Yeah. And the next day I'm doing a event up closer to Scranton at a winery. So for those people who don't like baseball, come up and meet me at the Farm to Table Fabulous in up east of Scranton.
Great. I'll get all that info. I'll put all these links on there because I'll come see you too at the Iron Pigs. Iron Pigs is a great place to be. Great for families.
Oh, loved the game last year. Looking forward to it this year. I'll get my schedule. I don't have it completely up on my Facebook page and website, but I'll try to do that for fans out there who are, wherever you are. I'm going to be in Omaha and Syracuse and a bunch of places this year.
Awesome. I have a couple other questions that I'm just curious about. Sure. You mentioned CGI. Has that hurt the actor? Have you felt it? Yeah,
I'm not a big. I don't go see movies because there's going to be great special effects in them. It's not like they repel me, but to me, like I said, I got into this business because I wanted to learn to probe my emotions and figure out how to use my emotions to help other people, or, and I think too often with CGI, they rely on it too much. What would stop? Some people disagree with me, but what would stop, you having a great CGI movie, but also have it be emotional, and because I think emotion is what draws us in. It's what opens our brains to take things in on a deeper level. So that's my feeling about CGI. Does it, like I said, it can, like anything else, it can be a distraction, or it can be depended on too heavily, but it's probably a lot more movies are being made because you can make a movie about anything. It'd be hard to shoot a movie about Mars without CGI.
Yeah. Yeah, but what would Jaws be like with CGI, like the original Jaws? It wouldn't be the...
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You can look back sometimes and you look at that there's moments of that shark looks so fake, and I thought at the time, but it didn't keep me from being scared. I was a lifeguard that summer that Jaws came out, and man, everybody was, I was in a pool. They're saying, like, are there sharks in here? I'm like, but that's what I'm saying. Like, that had a deep, deep emotional impact on somebody. And would it have if like now they got Sharknado and that stuff's all CGI. I don't know if it has the same weight. I think there's something about Field of Dreams, maybe you can't feel each one of those 3,000 farmers in their cars going back to but maybe you can. Maybe on some level we're astute enough as people to feel a human energy in there. Who knows? But it's not something I think I, it could be used more sparingly, in my opinion.
Besides Field of Dreams, what's your most favorite role that you've had?
Wow. I did an episode of House MD that I liked. And I was just proud of my work in it. I don't know if it was a brilliant episode. I did a Western called Desperado that I just thought was fun because I got to play, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's usually just the role that seems like fun. I was in I didn't do many comedies. I always thought I was a funny guy. Like I said, I did out the Second City, but I did a movie called Mom and Dad Save the World where I play King of the Idiots. Eric Idle plays my dad, and I thought I was good in that, but the movie didn't quite go places, so it's not remembered. But it was still fun to do.
TVs or movies? Is there a difference for an actor?
For me, I always felt like, and this has changed somewhat, but in my heyday, it was all to me about the time and money you spend. It makes sense. When you shoot a movie, usually it'd be 6 weeks or 8 weeks, sometimes 3 months shoot, and you'd have, $15 million to get an hour and a half. With a TV show, you usually shoot it in a week, 7 days. They'll have, maybe $1 million. So it makes sense that if you have to write it that fast, if you only have that much money to spend on it, and if you have to get it done that fast, in general, it's not going to be as good. I mean, and there's exceptions to that. There's been great television made on a budget and all that kind of stuff, but films were more fun to work on generally because you'd shoot less pages a day, usually, a couple pages, as opposed to, 8 or 10 that you'd shoot on a TV show in order to get it done in that time frame. But that to me was always the thing. I always liked working in the theater. I started 3 theater companies and did a lot of theater work because all those mediums I think are so different. You act differently when people are going to be watching it, particularly now on their phones, than you would if you're going to be on a big screen where your face is 40 feet high. You have to take those things in consideration. And of course, on stage, you get an immediate reaction from what you're doing. And you sort of control your performance more because you're doing it and people are seeing it. There's no editor in there who can take out your favorite moments or but, they also don't usually have, beautiful orchestral scores behind you. So, it's really so different, even though you'd think it's all acting. It's so different that I always enjoyed kind of going from one to the other and switching it up.
What's the perfect day look like for you?
Well, I have a great life. And so I wake up, 7-ish. I sit with my wife. We have tea. We probably talk for 3 or 4 hours just in the morning, drinking tea, petting the dog, watching the birds and the neighbors, gosh, my brother-in-law owns a restaurant. So, if we go over there I'm kind of a homebody when I'm not running around the country doing this stuff. I like building things. So that's kind of fun, but I'm a pretty good relaxer. I can get a lot out of just sitting. I built a deck behind my house that I sit on a porch swing and, just watch. Yesterday we sat out there for several hours watching hawks and vultures and crows and woodpeckers. And I don't know, I hate to be boring, but I suppose that's what I would do with my time, and still do as much as possible.
That sounds great. So
Yeah.
what do you have in store for this year? Where can we find you?
Gosh,
Other than the baseball stadiums that
a lot of
you guys
different
come out to.
places. I'm going to induction weekend.
Oh, nice.
Talking about having me at All-Star Weekend here at Dodger Stadium, and I'm going to be so I'm going to be in Cooperstown. I'm going to be at the field running up to the game in August, and then I've got the other dates around. I'm doing a screening of the movie in Omaha, Nebraska that I'll be available to do a Q&A afterwards, which is kind of one of my favorite venues because when people have watched the movie fresh, their questions are usually pretty fresh. And not only having been there for the shoot of the movie, but having researched the book, I know a lot about it that I could talk about for hours and hours. As you can see, I'm still going. But I mean, I just went to Italy who knew there was baseball players in Italy, but they was invited over there to do their convention just in January. And that was just incredible to be there. And, hopefully there'll be more of those. I'd love to go to Japan or any of those places to, just celebrate baseball and, just enjoy traveling. So yeah, I'll try to get my schedule up so anybody can check and just look on, I'm Dwier Brown everywhere on my social media and the books If You Build It. And so
it's a great book. I love to read. And it was a easy read. I don't know if that means anything to anybody. I read it in one night.
Yeah. Well, I tried to write a book that I would like to read. I like short chapters because you can plow through them and it feels like you're getting somewhere. And I tried to make it so that you'd want to read that next chapter, which is also short. And, so I've heard that from a lot of people and I didn't know if it was going to be a good book, but I've got, a lot of, I've got almost a 5-star reviews on Amazon. And I don't know, it's just great because it was just something I wanted to do. I didn't know if it would be successful. And I think I did pretty good for my first effort.
Cool. Well, Dwight, I really appreciate it. This meant a lot to me. I'm grateful. And I'll see you at the Iron Pigs in August.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. And thank you, Ryan. And I appreciate you inviting me on.
Sure. Thank you so much.